The plasma bolt missed Kyra's head by inches. She twisted through the corridor, her scaled wings scraping against metal walls as alarms shrieked through the station. 3 security officers pursued her, their weapons charged and ready. She had been careful, so careful, keeping to the shadows of the trading post for 2 weeks. But someone had seen her tail, reported her, and now they wanted her dead or captured. Her hearts pounded in separate rhythms as she burst through a maintenance door. The Draconis were hunted across 12 sectors. Humans called them monsters, demons, threats to civilization. Kyra had watched her nest sister die in human hands 3 years ago, torn apart by researchers who wanted to understand how dragonkin could breathe fire. She had sworn never to trust them again. The corridor split ahead. Left led to the docking bays, but security would expect that. Right dropped into the residential quarters, a maze of family units and apartments. She chose right, her clawed feet barely making sound on the deck plates. Behind her, boots hammered closer. They were faster than she expected. She rounded a corner and collided with something soft. A human child, maybe 5 years old, tumbled backward with a startled cry. The girl had blonde hair and tangled braids and wore pajamas covered in stars. She stared up at Kyra with wide eyes, not screaming, just watching as the dragon girl loomed over her with scales gleaming under harsh lights. The security team would arrive in seconds. Kyra could run, leave the child, disappear into the vents. But the human girl sat frozen in the middle of the corridor, directly in the line of fire. Without thinking, Kyra scooped the child up and dove into the nearest open doorway. The apartment was small and cluttered with toys. Kyra set the girl down gently, her claws retracting instinctively so she would not scratch the soft skin. The child's eyes were enormous, fixed on Kyra's face where silver scales met golden ones in patterns unique to her bloodline. "You're pretty," the girl whispered. Kyra's breath caught. Pretty. Not monster. Not demon. Pretty. Boots thundered past the door. The security team had not seen them enter. Kyra pressed herself against the wall, making her body as small as possible, her wings folded tight against her back. The child stood between Kyra and the door, tiny and fragile. But she did not run. She did not scream for help. "Are they chasing you?" the girl asked in a small voice. Kyra nodded, unable to speak. Her throat felt tight with fear and confusion. This should not be happening. Human children feared her kind most of all. The propaganda started early, teaching them that Draconis were savage beasts. "You can hide in my room," the girl said. She took Kyra's clawed hand in her own small fingers without hesitation. "Daddy's at work. He won't be home for 2 more hours." The touch sent shock through Kyra's entire body, warm, trusting, gentle. No human had touched her with kindness since she was captured 4 years ago. She followed the child into a bedroom painted with murals of space stations and distant planets. Stuffed animals covered the bed in a chaotic pile. "I'm Sophie," the girl said, pulling a blanket from her bed. "You can sit here. Are you hurt?" Kyra sank to the floor, her legs suddenly weak. She shook her head. "Not hurt? Not physically. But something inside her chest felt broken and sharp." Sophie sat beside her, so close their shoulders almost touched. "My daddy says people are mean sometimes because they're scared." "Are people mean to you?" "Yes," Kyra managed, her voice rough from disuse. "Very mean." "That's not fair," Sophie said with the absolute certainty only children possess. "You have nice eyes. They're like opals." Kyra looked at this small human who should fear her, who should call for help, who should see her as the monster everyone claimed she was. Instead, Sophie smiled and offered her a stuffed bear. "You can hold him if you're scared," Sophie said. "He makes me feel better." For the first time in 3 years, Kyra felt something other than terror when facing a human. She took the bear carefully, her claws barely dimpling the soft fabric, and held it against her chest where her heart still raced. The door to the apartment opened. Heavy footsteps approached the bedroom. Kyra tensed, preparing to fight or flee, but Sophie jumped up and ran to the doorway. "Daddy!" "You're home early." A man appeared in the doorway, tall and broad-shouldered, still wearing his engineering uniform from the station's maintenance division. His eyes found Kyra immediately, and she saw the recognition flash across his face. He knew what she was. His hand moved toward the comm device on his belt. This was the end. Kyra prepared to lunge for the window to take her chances with the vacuum rather than face capture again. Part 2. But the man's hand stopped. He looked at his daughter, then back at Kyra, then at his daughter again. Sophie stood between them, her small hand still clutching the doorframe, her expression earnest and pleading. "Daddy, this is my friend. She's hiding from mean people. Can she stay?" The man's jaw tightened. Kyra could see the conflict in his eyes, the war between duty and something else. His name tag read Daniel Morris. He worked maintenance, which meant he knew every regulation about harboring unauthorized aliens, especially Draconis, especially ones the security forces were actively hunting. "Sophie, sweetheart, go to your room for a minute," Daniel said quietly. "But Daddy, now, please." Sophie's lower lip trembled, but she obeyed, casting one last worried look at Kyra before disappearing into another room. The door closed with a soft click. Daniel stepped fully into the bedroom. Kyra rose to her feet, her wings spreading slightly in an instinctive defensive posture. She was larger than him by half a foot, her frame built for flight and combat. She could kill him before he reached his comm device. She had killed humans before, when they left her no choice. "I won't hurt her," Kyra said, the words rushing out. "I just needed somewhere to hide. I'll leave. I'll go now." "Sit down," Daniel said. It was not a command. Not quite. Kyra hesitated, every instinct screaming at her to run. But something in his voice made her pause. She lowered herself slowly back to the floor, keeping her eyes on him. Daniel moved to the window and checked the street below. Security patrols moved in organized patterns, searching. He closed the blinds and turned back to Kyra. "How long you been on the station?" 2 weeks. Maybe 3. I lost count. "Where are you trying to go?" "Anywhere that isn't here. Anywhere humans won't find me." Daniel was quiet for a long moment. His eyes moved over her scales, her wings, the places where old scars showed through in patches of darker coloring. Kyra had been beautiful once, by Draconis standards. Now she was a patchwork of damage and barely healed wounds. "My wife died 2 years ago," Daniel said abruptly. "Station accident. Decompression in the cargo bay where she worked." Sophie was 3. She stopped talking for 6 months after it happened. Wouldn't eat, wouldn't sleep, just sat and stared at nothing. Kyra did not understand why he was telling her this. Humans often spoke in circles when they were nervous or stalling. She shifted her weight, preparing to bolt if necessary. "The therapist said she needed stability, routine, safety, but I work 12-hour shifts. I can barely keep food on the table and pay for childcare. The station doesn't give a damn about maintenance workers or their kids." His voice was bitter now, tired. "Sophie spends most of her time alone or with whoever I can afford to watch her for a few hours." "I don't understand what this has to do with me," Kyra said carefully. Daniel met her eyes directly. "You're gentle with her." "I watched you catch her when you collided. You could have crushed her or clawed her, but you were careful. And Sophie hasn't smiled like that since her mother died." "I should not be here," Kea said. "If they find me in your home, they will arrest you. Take your child." "You're risking everything." "Yeah," Daniel agreed. "I am." He walked to the door, and Kyra tensed again. But he just leaned against the frame, looking exhausted in a way that went beyond physical tiredness. "I can't keep you hidden forever, but I can give you a few days. Time to rest, eat, figure out your next move. In exchange, you help me with Sophie. Watch her while I'm at work. Keep her safe, keep her happy." Kyra's mind reeled. This made no sense. Humans did not help Draconis. Humans hunted them, studied them, killed them. This had to be a trap. "Why?" she demanded. "Why would you trust me with your child?" Daniel's laugh was short and humorless. Because in the last 5 minutes, you've shown my daughter more genuine care than anyone on this station has in 2 years. Because she called you her friend and Sophie doesn't trust easily anymore. And because I'm desperate enough to take any help I can get, even from someone the station wants dead. He pushed off from the door frame and moved to the small desk in the corner. He pulled out a datapad and tapped through several screens. The security team is looking for a lone Draconis female, armed and dangerous, probably trying to steal supplies or sabotage station systems. That's the official report. He turned the pad so Kyra could see. Her own face stared back at her from a wanted posting, except the image made her look feral, monstrous, nothing like the exhausted refugee she actually was. If anyone asks, you're a licensed childcare provider I hired through an off-station agency. Your credentials are registered in the system as of 10 minutes ago. Name is Kara Morris. You're my cousin from the outer colonies. Kyra stared at him in disbelief. You're committing fraud. Identity fabrication. Harboring a fugitive. They could space you for this. They could, Daniel agreed calmly. But they won't look too closely at a maintenance worker's childcare arrangements. Nobody cares about people like us. We're invisible until something breaks. He set the datapad down and looked at her with an expression she could not quite read. Not pity. Not fear. Something else. Understanding, maybe. Or shared desperation. I'm not asking you to trust me, he said. I'm asking you to trust Sophie. And I'm asking you to let me trust you, even though everything I've been taught says I shouldn't. Kaeda's claws dug into the carpet. She thought of her nest sister's screams in the research facility. She thought of the human soldiers who had captured her, who had laughed as they beat her, who had placed bets on how long she could survive without food. She thought of every reason she had to refuse this offer, to run, to never let a human close enough to hurt her again. Then she thought of Sophie's small hand in hers, the way the child had called her pretty. The stuffed bear still clutched against her chest. 1 week, Kyra said finally. I'll stay 1 week. Help you with your daughter. Then I find a way off this station. Daniel nodded slowly. 1 week. Fair enough. He moved toward the door, then paused. There's a shower in the bathroom. Clean clothes in the closet that might fit. Sophie will want dinner in an hour. She likes pasta with red sauce. No vegetables. I don't know how to cook human food, Kyra admitted. Neither do I, Daniel said with the first real smile she had seen from him. We mostly survive on prepackaged meals and hope you'll fit right in. He left the room, and Kyra heard him talking softly to Sophie in the other room. Their voices were warm, familial, normal. Everything Kyra had lost when the humans destroyed her nest. She looked down at the stuffed bear in her hands. Its button eyes stared back at her with perpetual cheerfulness. Such a simple thing. Such a human thing. But Sophie had given it to her freely, without fear or hesitation. Kyra's inner eyelids flicked across her vision, a draconis gesture of confusion and uncertainty. She was in a human's home, wearing a false identity, agreeing to care for a human child. Every survival instinct she possessed screamed that this was insanity. But when Sophie peeked around the doorframe a minute later, grinning with excitement, Kyra found herself smiling back. Her fangs showed sharp and predatory, but Sophie did not flinch. Daddy says you're staying. Do you like puzzles? I have a really hard one with a space battle on it. Can you help me? Part 3. The first night was the hardest. Kyra sat rigid on the small couch while Daniel prepared Sophie for bed. Every sound from the corridor outside made her wings twitch. Every shadow that passed the window sent her pulse racing. She counted the seconds until security would burst through the door, until her brief reprieve ended in capture or death. But security never came. Daniel returned from putting Sophie to bed and handed Kyra a plate of heated synthetic protein and grain paste. It tasted bland and chemical, nothing like the fresh meat her kind preferred, but it was food. She ate carefully, aware of how her fangs looked to human eyes. She wants you to say good night, Daniel said, settling into a chair across from her. Fair warning, she'll probably ask for a story. Kyra set down her plate. I don't know human stories. Make something up. She's not picky. Kyra found Sophie tucked under blankets covered in cartoon rockets. The child's eyes lit up when Kyra entered. "Will you tell me about dragons?" Sophie asked immediately. "Real ones? Not the ones in my books?" Kaya settled on the edge of the bed, her tail curling around her feet. "We're not dragons. We're Draconis. It's different." "How?" "Dragons are myths, stories. We're real. We come from a world with 3 suns and red skies. We build cities in the mountains and fly between the peaks. Do you breathe fire?" Kyra hesitated. Fire breathing was one of the abilities humans feared most, the reason researchers had cut open her nest sister to study the biological mechanisms. But Sophie's face held only curiosity, no fear. "Some of us can," Kyra admitted. "Small flames. For cooking, for warmth, not weapons." "That's amazing," Sophie breathed. "Can you show me?" "No," Kyra said firmly. "It would set off the smoke detectors and bring security." Sophie's face fell, but she accepted this. "Will you tell me about your home?" So Kyra did. She spoke of crystal caverns and thermal vents, of nest bonds and flight training, of the great gathering halls where her people sang in harmonics that could shatter glass. She spoke carefully, editing out the violence, the war, the genocide that had scattered the Draconis across the galaxy. She made it a fairy tale, the kind Sophie could dream about safely. When the child's eyes finally drifted closed, Kyra sat for a long moment watching her breathe. So fragile, so trusting, so completely vulnerable to the universe's cruelty. She returned to the living room where Daniel waited. He handed her a blanket without comment. "Couch pulls out into a bed. Bathroom's yours if you need it. I sleep light, so if you try to leave in the night, I'll hear you." It was not a threat, just a statement of fact. Kyra nodded. "Why did you really agree to this?" she asked. "The truth, this time." Daniel was quiet, staring at his hands. 6 months ago, Sophie had a nightmare, woke up screaming about monsters coming to take her away like they took her mom. I held her for 3 hours while she cried, and I realized I couldn't do this alone anymore. I couldn't be everything she needed. He looked up at Kyra. "I saw how you held her today, like she was precious. Like her safety mattered more than your own. That's not something I see often on this station. People here are hard. They have to be to survive. But Sophie needs someone who remembers how to be gentle." "I'm not gentle," Kaya said. "I've killed people, humans. I'll do it again if I have to." "I know," Daniel said simply. "I've killed 2, in the war, before I came here. I understand doing what you must to survive." They sat in silence after that, 2 broken people in a broken place, held together by a sleeping child in desperation. The days that followed fell into unexpected rhythm. Daniel left for his shift at dawn. Kyra woke Sophie, helped her dress, made sure she ate the nutritional paste that passed for breakfast. Then they had the long hours of the station day to fill. Sophie taught Kyra human games, board games with incomprehensible rules about property acquisition. Card games that relied on patterns Kayada's triple-color vision could track effortlessly. Puzzle assembly, which soothed something deep in Kayada's mind, the satisfaction of making broken things whole again. In return, Kyra taught Sophie small things, how to fold paper into shapes that caught air currents and glided, how to listen to the station's ambient sounds and identify potential dangers, how to be still and quiet when needed, a survival skill Sophie had never learned in her short, sheltered life. On the 3rd day, Sophie asked to touch Kyra's wings. Kyra spread them carefully in the small living room, the membrane catching light in iridescent patterns. Sophie's fingers were gentle as they traced the bone structure, the delicate veins, the places where old tears had healed in silver scars. "Does it hurt when you fly?" Sophie asked. "Sometimes. I broke this wing 2 years ago. It healed wrong." "I'm sorry people hurt you," Sophie said with a child's earnestness. "I wish they wouldn't." Kyra's throat tightened. "I wish that too." On the 4th day, Daniel came home early with blood on his uniform. Kyra was on her feet instantly, wings spread, ready to defend or flee. But Daniel just looked exhausted. "Accident in the lower decks." Nobody died, but it was close. He stripped off his uniform jacket and tossed it toward the cleaning unit. I need a shower. Sophie ate? An hour ago. She's reading in her room. Daniel nodded and disappeared into the bathroom. Kaya heard the water start, heard the soft sounds of a man trying to cry quietly where his daughter would not hear. She understood that sound. She had made it herself in the weeks after her nest sister died. When Daniel emerged 20 minutes later, Kyra had heated 2 portions of protein paste and set them on the small table. He looked at her with surprise. You don't have to. Sit, Kyra said. Eat. Tell me what happened. So he did. He talked about faulty seals and pressurization failures, about how the station's owners cared more about profit margins than safety standards, about how maintenance workers like him patched problems with inadequate supplies and hope, about how every shift he wondered if that day would be the one where luck ran out. Kaya listened. She did not offer empty comfort or false reassurance. She just listened, the way her nest mother had taught her to do for nestmates in distress. Thank you, Daniel said when he finished, for staying, for helping. I know it's not what you signed up for. I signed up for 1 week, Kyra reminded him. It's been 4 days. I know. They looked at each other across the table. Something had shifted between them, some wall lowering by increments. Not trust, not quite, but recognition. 2 survivors recognizing each other. What will you do? Daniel asked. After the weekends, find a ship. Get off this station. Find other Draconis, if any still survive. And if they don't? Kyra had no answer for that. The silence between them stretched. Sophie appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. I had a bad dream. Can Kyra sleep in my room tonight? Daniel looked at Kyra. Kyra looked at Sophie. The child's face was blotchy from crying, her eyes wide and frightened. Yes, Kyra said before she could think better of it. I'll stay with you. Part 4, Sophie's room, became a nest of sorts over the following nights. Kyra would curl up on the floor beside the child's bed, her wings wrapped around herself like a cocoon, and tell stories until Sophie's breathing deepened into sleep. Then she would lie awake, listening to the station's mechanical heartbeat, wondering what she was doing here. On the 6th day, everything changed. Daniel's shift manager called in the morning. Emergency situation in the reactor cooling system. All maintenance crew needed immediately. Daniel looked torn, glancing between his uniform and Sophie, who sat at the table finishing her breakfast. I can manage, Gaeta said before he could ask. Go. It might be 12 hours, maybe more if things are bad. We'll be fine. Daniel hesitated at the door. If security comes, they won't. We've been careful. Now go, before people die. He left at a run, and Kyra found herself truly alone with Sophie for the first time since this arrangement began. The child seemed unbothered, chattering about a game she wanted to play. But Kyra felt the weight of responsibility settle over her like physical pressure. This human child was now entirely in her care. If anything happened, if Sophie was hurt or frightened or endangered, it would be Kyra's fault. The trust Daniel had placed in her was absolute and terrifying. They spent the morning with Sophie's learning programs, educational games that taught mathematics and language skills. Kyra found herself fascinated by human child development. How different it was from Draconis hatchlings who emerged from their eggs already mobile and aware. Human children were so vulnerable, so dependent for so long. In the afternoon, Sophie wanted to go to the recreation deck. Kyra's every instinct rebelled against the idea. Too many people, too many eyes, too many chances for recognition. But Sophie's face fell when Kyra hesitated, and she heard herself agreeing. The recreation deck occupied a central area of the station, a large space with artificial gravity slightly lower than standard to allow for jumping games and low-flight activities. Children ran everywhere, supervised by exhausted-looking parents and childcare workers. Kyra kept her wings folded tight, her hood pulled up to shadow her face. Sophie ran ahead to join a group playing some kind of ball game. Kyra positioned herself where she could watch without being too obvious, settling on a bench near the wall. That's your kid? Kyra's head snapped around. A human woman sat nearby, holding a sleeping infant. She nodded towards Sophie. I watch her, Kyra said carefully, for her father. Thought I hadn't seen you before. New hire? Yes. Recent. The woman shifted the infant to her other shoulder. Lucky kid. Most childcare workers on this station don't actually seem to like children. You, though, you watch her like a hawk. It's nice. Kaya relaxed fractionally. The woman seemed genuinely friendly, not suspicious. She's a good child, easy to watch. Mine will be a terror when she's older, I can already tell. The woman smiled tiredly. I'm Lisa, by the way. Engineering, Section D. Kara said, using her false name. Maintenance, Section B. They fell into easy conversation. The kind parents and caregivers share while watching children play. Lisa complained about her husband's long shifts and the terrible station food. Kyra listened more than she spoke. But it felt strange and almost pleasant to interact with a human who saw her as just another worker, another person trying to survive. Then Sophie screamed. Kyra was moving before conscious thought, crossing the deck in 3 powerful strides. Sophie lay on the ground, her knee bleeding from a fall. An older boy stood nearby, sneering. Clumsy baby, the boy taunted. Can't even catch a ball. Kyra knelt beside Sophie, checking the injury with gentle claws. Just a scrape, nothing serious, but the child was crying hard. It's okay, Kyra murmured. You're okay. It's just a scratch, the boy laughed. Look at her crying like a little... Kyra's head turned, and something in her expression made the boy stop mid-word. Her eyes, which had been carefully neutral all day, now reflected the predator she was. The boy took 3 steps backward. Apologize, Kyra said quietly. I didn't. Now. The boy's mother appeared, drawn by the commotion. She took in the scene. Her son, Kyra's protective crouch over Sophie, the blood on the deck. What happened here? The mother demanded. Your son knocked her down and mocked her for crying, Kyra said flatly. He needs to apologize. The mother's eyes narrowed. She looked at Kyra more closely, and recognition flickered across her face. She saw the scales at Kyra's wrists where the sleeves had ridden up. Saw the way Kyra's posture was wrong for a human, too predatory, too alien. Marcus, come here, the mother said sharply. Then to Kaya, keep your kind away from my child. The words hit like a physical blow. Kyra felt Sophie tense against her, felt the other caregivers on the deck turning to look. Lisa stood nearby, her face confused, trying to understand what was happening. Your child hurt mine, Kyra said, keeping her voice level with effort. An apology is basic decency. I don't take parenting advice from monsters, the woman spat. Security will hear about this. She grabbed her son and left. The deck had gone quiet. Everyone was staring now. Kyra saw recognition spreading like fire, whispers starting, hands reaching for comm devices. We need to leave, Kyra said to Sophie. Right now. She scooped the child up, ignoring the protests from other caregivers. Lisa tried to follow them, calling Kara's name, but Kyra was already at the exit. She ran through the corridors with Sophie held against her chest, the child's blood smearing on her shirt. They made it back to the apartment minutes before the security alert went out. Kyra heard it through the station's comm system. All residents advised that a dangerous Draconis female has been identified in residential section 4, possibly disguised as child care provider. Do not approach. Report sightings immediately. Sophie was crying harder now, frightened by the running and by Kyra's tension. Kyra set her down and grabbed medical supplies from the bathroom, forcing her hands to steady as she cleaned and bandaged Sophie's knee. It's okay, Sophie said through her tears. That lady was mean. You didn't do anything wrong. But Kyra had done everything wrong. She had let herself believe this could work, let herself pretend she could be normal, safe, accepted. Let herself forget what she was in human eyes. Daniel's comm device was on the table. Kyra grabbed it and sent a single message. Compromised. Coming for Sophie. Be ready. The reply came in seconds. Don't run. Stay there. Trust me. Trust. That word again. Kyra looked at Sophie, who had stopped crying and was watching her with worried eyes. Are the mean people coming? Sophie asked. Part 5. The apartment door opened. Daniel burst in, still in his work gear, his face flushed from running. He took in the scene instantly. Kyra poised by the window ready to flee, Sophie on the couch with her bandaged knee, the tension thick enough to cut. They know, Kyra said. A woman recognized me at the recreation deck. Security's looking for me right now. I know. I heard the alert. Daniel crossed to his computer terminal and began typing rapidly. How much did she see? Enough. Scales. The way I move. She called me a monster in front of everyone. Daniel's jaw clenched. How many people heard her? 20. Maybe more. Damn. He pulled up security footage, his clearance codes giving him access to station systems most maintenance workers never touched. Kyra realized with surprise that Daniel had been careful to appear less capable than he was. Another survival tactic. He found the recreation deck footage and played it back. Kyra watched herself move across the screen, saw how inhuman her speed had been, how protective her posture over Sophie. The moment was damning. Okay, Daniel said after a minute. I can work with this. Work with what? They saw me. They know I'm here. There's no talking our way out of this. Daniel spun his chair to face her. Actually, there might be. Lisa sent me a message 5 minutes ago. Said she was at the recreation deck, saw what happened. She wants to testify on your behalf. Testify to what? That I'm exactly what they think I am? That you protected a child. That another child was injured and you responded with appropriate care. That Helen Marcus is a known troublemaker who's filed 17 complaints against other caregivers in the past 2 years, all of them dismissed as frivolous. Kyra shook her head. This is insane. You can't argue policy when they want me dead. Watch me. Daniel returned to his terminal and began composing a formal statement. Station regulations require a hearing before any resident can be forcibly removed, even suspected fugitives. It's an old rule, barely enforced, but it's still on the books. I'm invoking it now, and when they hold this hearing, when they confirm I'm Draconis, then I present evidence that you've committed no crime on this station, that you've been caring for my daughter with no incidents, that you have valid child care credentials registered in the system, forged credentials that won't stand up to real scrutiny. They will if nobody looks too close, and nobody will if we make this a bureaucratic nightmare. I'll file counter-complaints against Helen Marcus for child endangerment since her son caused the injury that started this mess. I'll get testimonies from other parents who saw what happened. I'll bury them in paperwork until they decide it's easier to just let this go. Kyra stared at him. You're gambling your career, your life, your daughter's safety on bureaucratic incompetence? Not incompetence. Apathy. This station has real problems, real threats. They don't have the resources to chase down every minor incident. If we make enough noise in the right ways, they'll move on to easier targets. It was crazy, foolish, desperate. But as Kyra looked at Daniel's determined face, she realized he actually believed it could work. And more than that, he was willing to bet everything on it. Sophie climbed off the couch and walked to Kyra on wobbly legs, her knees still tender. She wrapped her small arms around Kyra's waist. Please don't leave, Sophie said. I like you. You're my friend. Kyra's hearts twisted. She looked down at this child who had shown her nothing but acceptance, who had called her pretty and held her hand and trusted her absolutely. She thought of the past 6 days, the unexpected gentleness of them, the strange peace she had found in this broken little family. She thought of her nest sister dying in human hands. She thought of every reason to run, to never trust, to keep herself safe behind walls of fear and anger. Then she thought of Sophie reading beside her on the couch, Daniel thanking her for listening, Lisa calling her name as she ran, wanting to help, not to hurt. I'll stay, Kyra said quietly. I'll testify at your hearing. But if this goes wrong, if it goes wrong, I take responsibility. You were deceived by my forged credentials. You thought you were legal. The blame falls on me, not you. That's not non-negotiable. Daniel's expression was firm. Sophie needs you. I need you. But more than that, you deserve a chance to exist without running. So we take the risk. The hearing happened 3 days later in a small administrative office. Helen Marcus was there with her son, flanked by a station lawyer who looked bored. Lisa came as a witness, along with 2 other parents from the recreation deck. Daniel presented his case with calm precision, citing regulations Kaya had never heard of, presenting documentation that looked official and legitimate. The hearing officer, a tired woman named Sandra Chen, listened with the expression of someone who had seen too many petty disputes. She reviewed the footage from the recreation deck, the medical records of Sophie's injury, the testimonies from witnesses. The Draconis individual showed appropriate care response, Lisa testified. I've been watching her with Sophie for days. She's gentle, attentive, exactly what a good caregiver should be. Helen Marcus sputtered about monsters and danger, but her son's testimony was damning. He admitted he had knocked Sophie down, admitted he had mocked her for crying. The lawyer looked increasingly uncomfortable. Sandra Chen closed the file after an hour. I find no evidence of wrongdoing by the child care provider identified as Kara Morris. Miss Marcus, your complaint is dismissed. Mr. Morris, your counter-complaint regarding your daughter's injury is noted, but given the minor nature of the harm, I'm recommending mediation rather than formal charges. Helen Marcus stood up, outraged. She's not human. She's one of those dragon things. You can't possibly... The species of the child care provider is irrelevant to this case, Sandra said tiredly. What matters is whether proper care was provided. It was. Case closed. They left the office in stunned silence. Daniel grabbed Kara's hand and squeezed it once, quick and grateful. Sophie, who had been waiting outside with another caregiver, ran to them and grabbed both their hands. Did it work? Can Kyra stay? Yes, sweetheart, Daniel said. She can stay. That night, after Sophie was asleep, Kyra and Daniel sat in the small living room. The station hummed around them, oblivious and eternal. I've been thinking, Daniel said, about permanent arrangements. If you want to stay longer than a week. I'm not safe here. Today worked, but eventually someone else will report me. Someone with more authority, more resources. Probably. But until that happens, you have a place. Sophie loves you. Hell, I'm pretty sure I depend on you now more than I want to admit. And you seem less terrified than when you first got here. Kyra considered this. The past 9 days had changed something fundamental in her. She had learned that not all humans were monsters. That some of them were just broken people trying to survive, same as her. That trust was terrifying and maybe, possibly, worth the risk. What if they come for me, for real, not just a bureaucratic hearing? Then we deal with it together, because that's what families do. Family. The word resonated in Kyra's chest where her hearts beat in dual rhythm. Not nestmates by blood, but something chosen. Something built from necessity and kindness and desperate hope. I'll stay, Kyra said, as long as I can. As long as you'll have me. Daniel smiled, truly smiled, for the first time since she had met him. Good. Because Sophie's already planning your birthday party and trying to explain why you're suddenly gone would break her heart. They sat in comfortable silence after that. Outside, the station turned on its axis. Security patrols moved through corridors, unaware and uncaring that in one small apartment, 3 impossible people had formed an equally impossible family. Sophie appeared in her doorway, rubbing her eyes. I had another dream, but it was a good one this time. We were all flying together. You were teaching me how to use wings. Kyra's wings spread slightly, an instinctive response to the child's words. Sophie walked over and climbed into Kyra's lap, settling against her scaled chest like it was the most natural thing in the world. Will you really teach me to fly someday? Sophie asked sleepily. Humans don't have wings, little one, but maybe you could carry me. Just once. I bet the station looks beautiful from way up high. Kyra looked at Daniel, who nodded slightly. Permission. trust. Faith that she would keep his daughter safe even in the dangerous act of flight. Maybe, Kara said softly. When you're bigger, when it's safe. Promise? Kaya thought about promises, about trust, about all the reasons she should say no. Then she thought about Sophie calling her pretty, about Daniel defending her in a hearing, about Lisa testifying on behalf of someone she barely knew, about small acts of courage that changed everything. I promise, Kyra said. Sophie smiled and closed her eyes, completely content. Daniel watched them with an expression of wonder and relief, and Kyra sat very still, holding this human child, and let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she had found something worth staying for. The station turned. The universe continued its indifferent expansion. But in that moment, in that small apartment, 3 survivors had become something more. They had become hope.